Turn on any American teen movie and you'll see the same stereotypes across the board. At the top of the school hierarchy, you have the muscle-bound alpha bullying jock and his catty cheerleading beauty queen who kind of runs the school. Then there's everyone else, all segregated by hobbies, identities, and halfway pitted against each other. The less popular sports players that people ignore, but will get them into college, the band geeks, the theater geeks, fantasy and sci-fi nerds, the stoners, the goths, the computer geeks. You ask anyone from any other nation and they'll be confused as hell about all this. It makes literally no sense to them, as this is a purely American phenomenon. They may segregate based on other things, but there is no real hierarchy in the way there is in the US. For one thing, high school in other nations is very different. There is a lot more freedom and personal responsibility expected from the kids. It is a lot more like college than like elementary school, where if you don't show up, it's on you, as opposed to in the US, where your location needs to be monitored as a teen in high school. The only place this kind of hierarchy system exists in human nature is prisons, where mobility is restricted, one feels trapped and isolated, and one has no other outlet for their autonomy, and they begin to take it out on others trapped in there with them. The jock as a position of privilege is nearly impossible in most nations. They can be in certain schools, but not in most schools. In Japan, for example, unless there are specifically sports-based high schools to get you on track for the major leagues, there are no sports teams. Sports run on a club system, where the school will fund every club the same based on the number of participants. Imagine the astronomy or writing club in your school getting the same funding per person as your local sports team. The idea is hard to comprehend in the US. It teaches how to work in a group, how to organize, and how to advertise and campaign for people to join your club, as anime will tell you the competition to attract new members can be fierce. In Germany, it is a step further. Sports have no place in school. School is a place to learn, not play sports. Sports are taken care of by local community groups and clubs that work just fine without any ties to their schools. It also teaches organization and keeps school rivalry down during the most emotionally erratic time of a teen's life. Local sports clubs get the community itself connected along with other activities. They invented Meetup before Silicon Valley ever thought of it, and it helps them learn, organize, and gain leadership. And with that organizing being part of their upbringing, it makes them much more politically organized. Neither of these models would work in the current US system for a very important reason. Jocks as a privileged class in the US exist as US schools are bizarre in that we have sports teams that have so much influence and financial reliance for the school due to our screwed up education tax laws tied to local property taxes. This was a holdover from redlining and other racist policies so that rich school tax money would go to rich neighborhood schools only, and the poor would get whatever funds they could scrounge up, often relying on student sports ticket prices. Schools will do anything to keep their top players playing, so they often get ridiculous privileges and can get away with nearly everything, especially in the more rural regions where high school sports are almost a religion. That level of privilege warps the school mindset horribly. Steroid use, underage drinking, DUIs, rapes are all swept under the rug when at all possible. In small towns, the police are often in on the cover-ups too. Small towns have some of the most nepotistic systems of government, with old money families pretty much running the place, and since sports are such a lofty position of power, kids who don't have family ties, who are really good at sports, can often get pushed out of sports in favor of kids of more influential families. The small town myth of simplicity and honesty couldn't be further from the truth in many areas, especially where sports come into play. I did a video on where the everyone gets a trophy mindset came from, and I argued that the phenomenon was an unhelpful backlash to the blind worship of sports over all other accomplishments. Any other non-sport accomplishment pale in comparison to things accomplished in sports to the American school kid's mind, and this is why. The causes of the problems are becoming more known, and thank goodness geek culture is becoming more normalized and accepted thanks to the internet. Participation trophies aren't needed when people get the choice to participate in what they have the passion and talent for, and even if they aren't the absolute best, they still have merit and self-esteem from competing in something they enjoy, and getting recognition for it, as opposed to when I was a teen and my winning second place in a C++ competition at the state level was viewed much more like a cute little gold star sticker compared with the football or basketball team winning second place and receiving the accolades of someone who cured cancer. But I'm not bitter. No, not bitter. America needs to restructure its entire school funding system based purely on how many students it has, so it never has to rely on its sports teams to keep itself afloat, and there are no poor and rich schools who get funded different based on the very local tax base. Every child deserves an equally good education. If we want to even pretend to live in a meritocracy, which is at worst a blatant lie in the US, and at very best a very sick joke.